Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Yellowjackets. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I want to bring up the fact is I forgot to bring this up last episode, but I figure I might as well bring it up at the top of this episode. Is I really like the opening credits for this show, just how it's stylized the way it is. I think that's just so dope, like using that VHS effect, especially like making it seem like the video is kind of messed up, and how it kind of does that glitchy thing where it kind of rewinds and like a little bit, and just like how it's laggy in certain regards. I'm like, just legitimate. I just think that's such a great representation because the show is what it is. That is a show that takes place in the 90s and a show that does take place present day. So I thought that was kind of a nice like representation of that. And it's just to me like probably honestly I think is one of the most stylized openings for something, you know. It's like simple, but I just think it's so dope in its own regard. And plus with the music and on top of it, I think it's just a really nice opening. And so I really thought that last episode, but I forgot to talk about it. So I forgot to talk about this episode. But getting into the episode, let's talk about everything in the past first. Obviously, we're dealing with the fact is that we got a little insight into Natalie's circumstances. Apparently, she killed her dad, which I did love that reveal over the course of the episode, because the entire time you're thinking like, oh, she killed her dad. She never actually killed her dad. She pointed a gun at him, but the safety was on, and he was talking about how useless she was, and he's like, oh, like he's like, the safety's on, safety's off. He's like, oh, don't have to worry about hiding the gun when my daughter's so useless. And she's like, you're the useless one. He was like, what'd you say to me? And as he tried to turn back around, he tripped and shot himself. I'm like, oh. But I guess Natalie feels some guilt because she was going... I mean, maybe there's a combination of, one, guilt because she wanted to kill him. Two, the fact of the matter is maybe because she didn't actually get to do it. It didn't, like... I mean, I think maybe the guilt would probably be even more if she had done it. But it doesn't erase the guilt that she did pull the trigger. It's just the gun didn't go off because the safety was on, so... But, as the episode progresses, like, initially, you know, Travis is messing around with the gun, but, you know, Ben's like, right, Travis isn't wrong about us needing to use that because we need to start hunting because we don't have much food left. So everyone gets their shot at it. Travis is pretty good at it, but he is kind of a dick, and he's just like, I felt like there was something about him that was kind of awkward around the ladies that I thought was kind of fascinating, because at first I was like, he's overcompensating, but we actually learned from his time with Natalie, because Natalie calls him Flex at one point in time, which everyone else was doing, and he pointed the gun at her. He's like, don't call me that. Like, I wondered, did he take extra issue from it because it was Natalie, and maybe there was already something there? I don't know. But both of them proved to be pretty good at it, because that was a life lesson for Natalie, so she was a lot more prepared this time. Like, granted, she missed the first shot, but Travis was being a dick about it, and she's like, no, give me another chance, and she got it. And then it turned to a contest of, like, who can get, like, the 5-point shot. Like, every time you hit a can, you get 5 points, but you get the 5 tries, and Natalie hit all 5 when Travis only hit 4. So, them as the top shooters got sent off to do the hunting, but it turns out Travis' main thing for going out there was actually getting the ring from his father, whose body, he went back to the crash site to dig up his dad's body because he wanted to get something for his brother, because even he in retrospect realizes how much of a dick he's been acting towards his brother, but it's just because he's hurting just as much as because like, it's a very important line that Natalie says to him, where it's like, despite how much of our dick our dads are, we still miss them even when they're gone, you know? So because like Travis is like, oh, my dad was shitty, you know? So for him, he's old enough to remember like his dad's terrible side, but it doesn't change the fact is that, yeah, right, your dad is gone. That doesn't make it any easier, but he realizes that he's been lashing out and taking it out on Javi, you know? And so he wants to give something so that Javi can remember their dad by, because he didn't remember it at the time, but it's like their great-grandfather's ring or something. It's like something that's been passed down in the family, so he wants to get that back for his brother. But when the time comes, he can't, he digs up, but he throws up because it's too much. Like, Travis acts like the tough guy, but, you know, Natalie's still like, probably like, I'd say I say Misty's probably like the toughest, because this is her chance to show everybody up. But Natalie ended up cutting off the coach's finger just so they could get the ring. But like I said, they also bonded over the fact that he explained why people call him that. You know, it's like they call him that because when he was in 7th grade or something, he got like a spinal surgery, and basically this bully Bobby like saw his scar and immediately said like, oh, he removed a rib just so he could, suck his own dick. And I was like, that's, once again, showing you, like, man, kids suck. I mean, he had a spinal surgery, and it's like, yeah. And the fact is that the girls perpetuate that too. Because I guess for them, it's like, they don't know the truth behind it, because everyone at the time were kids, so no one knew. Because even Natalie was like, she called him Flex because everyone called him Flex. She didn't know it was like a effed up, like, tale behind, like, why he got labeled that. But, yeah. Like, cause girls probably call him that because, because they know the funny story of, like, right, he's trying to, like, oh, like, he had surgery to try and suck his own dick, but at least Natalie and Travis, like, joke about it. She's like, can you suck your own dick? And he was like, I wish, and they laugh about it. But in that was a really sweet bonding moment between the both of them. And in actuality, when the time came to get the deer, Natalie ends up pulling the trigger, and Travis is like, okay, just breathe. And luckily, they got the deer and they brought it back. What I thought was fascinating, though, is like when Ben's like, all right, I was like, cool, so what do we do next? And it's like, right, we got to skin it. Well, we got to bleed it out first. And then and he's like, so who wants to go? No one. Not Natalie, not Travis. No one wanted to do that. Misty put up her hand, but Shauna was like, I'll do it. Because she had always said, like, oh, I'm not going good with I feel like I should be the one with the guns, but... Because even, I wonder what made her decide to step up in this moment, because no one else was jumping. Well, other than Misty, no one else jumped at it, but she did, and she went right to it. She slit, and even Ben was like, yeah. But yeah, even later on when the leg of it's cooked, and everyone's like, she's the one slicing off pieces and dishing them out. I'm like, the fact that she jumped on that so quickly, but I guess that's coming a little full circle considering what she did with the rabbit. But let's not also forget, we also know they applied that to the people that they ended up killing and eventually eating, because we've seen the process of stripping someone down and bleeding them out, and then strip them of their clothes, and then slashing and slicing someone's throat to bleed them out. So we've already seen that. Now we kind of see that come a little full circle in certain regards, seeing the beginning of that way before we, but we've seen the beginning of the end result when we saw them kill whoever it was in a trap, which it seems like it's Jackie, might be someone else. Not unless it ends up being like a Lottie situation. Because, once again, my thought was at the time, it didn't seem like it was Jackie because the hair, not unless she did something to highlight her hair and make it seem blonde, but, maybe, by then, enough time had passed and, her natural roots started growing out so her hair, wasn't blonde anymore. But I'm assuming in retrospect, I'm like, not unless it was Lottie, because whoever it was that died at the beginning had the chain on, which made it seem like it might have been Jackie, but she didn't have blonde hair. The person who currently has it is Shauna, but only other, dark-haired person I figured it would be Lottie, but I could be mistaken. But why would she have the necklace? Not unless Shauna ends up giving it to her just to make her feel better. And maybe they killed Lottie because Lottie is without her pills and she's seeming a little off because she's the only one that's catching the bad vibes from the place. It's because I was wondering what they were going to do about the dead body situation. It's right, they I guess they just immediately buried the guy afterwards because Nat's Lottie, it's okay, we already taken care of it, the guy's buried. She's yeah, but something terrible must have happened here. Then she's the first one that notices the symbols on the tree. She didn't say anything at the time, but watching the preview at the beginning, when we look at that attic, that symbol is there too, across the floor, you can see that symbol's carved in there. So it's what's that about? And then they found the plane earlier, and then Lottie says a line of, it didn't want him to leave. And then Taissa looks at her shut up about all that spooky stuff. But it's starting to get to Taissa because no one else really took notice of that, her saying that, until Taissa said something. Because it's Lottie was right about was right about the place having a bad vibe, but like I said, we still don't know what her medication was for, but she definitely seems off. But maybe it's just kind of oh, maybe she's a little, maybe her meds kind of dulled her senses, which they can, so maybe now it's supposed to be oh, now she's free of her medication, she's a little more keen senses and picking up on stuff. Van almost got it pretty hard though, speaking of the plane, because that blade came uber close to slicing her up. I was ooh! It was Van, but then Jackie. Luckily, Jackie pushed Van out of the way, which I love. She was we're good, right? And Van's almost Van didn't even say anything, because it's you left me to die, and just because you saved me, that's I'm supposed to be super okay with it. It's maybe Van's okay with it, maybe not. It's definitely going to be interesting to see. Just the fact that Jackie's like, so that means we're square, right? And I'm like, I love that. It's almost, because it almost takes away from your heroism, because it almost seems like, oh, did you really do that just because you wanted you and Van to be good? Luckily, I think Laura Lee was able to cut it off in time, but also it was trapped amongst vines, so it probably wouldn't have reached her anyway. Who knows, given, but the plane does work, not unless that was the last of the gas or something. Plus, it's like tangled up and stuff, so we'll have to wait and see where things kind of go on that front. Shauna did open up to Javi and give him, because she's got her journals, and she gives him a page. She's like, right, a way to like process everything they're going through, talk about her feelings, and she gave Javi a page. I'm curious, what he wrote on that page, and whether things will change, because he's probably like, oh, screw my brother, like, fuck Travis, he sucks, blah, blah, blah. But, Travis was nicer to him, so maybe that shifts things a little bit. Obviously, Missy is the butt of the jokes, despite her being like the one that helped you guys survive and stuff like that. She was the MVP episode 2. They're back to like making her the butt of the jokes, because they're like, oh, want to get back to Sponge, Ben and stuff like that. And she storms off, and they're like, ooh, that's so mean. You can hear like, it's Taissa and Van, but it's like, yeah, of course you two would gang up, because you're like, oh, like, Van, that's so mean of you. It's because like Taissa has a thing for Van. I don't know if it's like reciprocal, like whether or not Van feels the same way or not. But I was like, yep. Because I think slowly but surely, because you saw the look on Misty's face when she saw that plane. She was like, no, we can't go back yet. I've got to be top dog. Because she was even helping Ben actually take a shit earlier in the episode. She's like, oh, like it helped me. He's just like, stop talking. She's like, I can even sing. And at one point he's like, oh God, and he relaxes. I don't know if like, oh, it actually did help and he was able to shit, or he just couldn't because of her. But she definitely is resentful towards him, because later on he's walking by and she trips him. She's like, oh my God, you gotta watch where you're going. And he's looking at her because he's almost like, I saw you. I saw you trip me, you little crazy person, you. Because she won't, and this doesn't just stop in the past. It's super present day, how like in the middle, like she wants to be the center of all this. She wants to be, I don't think in any shape or form she is behind this, but she is manipulating the situation because she wants to feel special. She wants to feel important. She wants to be the center of attention, because she does have a thing for Ben, and she wants him to see her, but he doesn't. It's like, oh, you're over here being impressed with like, oh, what Shauna's doing, what Nat and Travis did. Like, it's like, no, show me attention. I'm the one that took care of you. I'm the one that cut your leg off. I'm there to help you every step of the way. And it's like she's not getting the love and support and admiration she was at one point in time. Like I said in episode 2, all that's kind of dried up. So she's kind of lashing out a little bit, in particular on Ben, because it's like, oh, like, don't get it twisted. You need me, so it is interesting. And I didn't even think about it at all the past couple of episodes. She does work at like a old folks home, like a facility where, people need to be taken care of. So I don't know if she'd be classified necessarily as a nurse. I think she would be, but like she's in a profession where she takes care of people. So it's interesting how that kind of came full circle in that regard. So that's all the past stuff. Some present stuff we get into is Taissa worried about, trying to get this woman Diane on her side. It's like, right, if I could get this woman's money to back us, like, we will have a like fighting chance, because of those ads from the previous episode, her poll numbers have kind of like taken a hit. So she needs this money to make a difference. So she got to like, put her best foot forward. And then we had that creepy camera angle where it's like, oh, like from the closet. I was like, what is that? And it's like, oh, it's Sammy laying in the cover. I was like, that's not creepy. How very, like, well, he was locked in there. I was about to say how very Sixth Sense of you, like Haley Joel Osment, but I'm like, no, he got locked in there. That's a different thing. But I thought that was so creepy. But then it's like, oh, go off. And it's just like, the way, when he looks back, part of me is like, you don't think Simone is the bad person he was referencing? Because I guess it's like the babysitter. It's like, oh, Tess or something is going to come over. And I'm like, is she the bad one? Like, because there's this look on Sammy's face that I'm like, there's something there. But it's also like Taissa isn't giving it the full attention like she should be. Just she's so focused on the campaign, because it's like, right, once we're able to get through this, get the money, then everything's going to work out, everything's going to be fine. So they show up at the party, the movers and shakers. You're trying to appease everyone so they can give you their money. You want them to empty their pockets. But then I thought was an interesting thing, like the moment the pig gets brought out, Taissa sees it as a deer and is like, nope, I'm not there anymore. I can't. And so it does come up later on because there's like a couple that comes up being like, and the question is whether that was really being asked or whether that was in Taissa's head. I don't know. They're like, no, what really went down on that island? Damn it. And you were lost. What really went down in the wilderness? I had to say damn it because I did it again. Like, I can't. It's just like island comes out my mouth before wilderness. My mouth seems like it thinks faster than my brain does sometimes. Thinks faster. My mouth speaks faster than my brain can think sometimes. It feels like that. I guess it's just because I get in like a little bit of an autopilot mode sometimes, but regardless, I thought it was interesting because she picked something off of one of the catering plates and she bit in it. She's like, oh, it's just meat, and she put it back. Because there was the moment last episode where Nat had made a point to Missy like, oh, jerky, really? And she's like, what? And so it seems like, because I was about to say Shauna hasn't gone like vegan or vegetarian because the rabbit, so it makes it seem like that's not the case. So it's, I guess Taissa out of anyone went full vegetarian to kind of counter that. Now whether Nat has, I'm trying to think like, was there an instance of her actually eating something or not? Like meat, because she was at dinner, but she was out, but I don't remember if we saw her actually eating anything. So I don't know if she, maybe Taissa is the only one amongst them that's a meat eater. I mean, not a meat eater, but it became a little overwhelming because like all these questions and just being surrounded. I guess like she says like the combination of all that champagne in her stomach with no food, because she forgot to eat before she arrived. And she's seeing the wolf, and I guess what that symbolizes from their escapades of being lost. But Diane comes over to her, and they actually get talking about things. And for Taissa, like how important this is for her. That it's like, right, people see me married to a woman, and she's like, and for kids to grow up and be like, hey, that's cool, that's good, and how much can be changed in one generation. And, Diane's like, oh, yeah, I'm buying into everything. It's like, I want to support someone like you because she's like, you're very vulnerable. Like, your optimism is rare. And I guess the argument could be maybe Taissa's so optimistic to combat and overcompensate from everything they went through when they were lost, But Diane kept being like, right, she essentially told Taissa, like, oh, I'll give you all the backing you need. She talks about people always spilling their truths, their secrets to her. She's like, oh, I'm like a well of them. And it's like, if you want to, you can open up to me about it. So she's like, I want to know the truth. I want to know the real you. Can you give me that? And she's like, yes, of course. I'll just be genuinely, I'll give all that is me. Which that plays interestingly enough with the Shauna thing, but we'll get there in a second. But in that moment, Diane was like, what really happened out there? And she tried to tell it. So like, no, I heard this is the news-fed version of, I want to know the real one. And it's just like, and Taissa was tired. She's like, what makes you think just because you're rich and powerful, you think you're entitled to whatever you want? And she's like, basically, she was like, you need to fix your tone because of what I've done for women's issues, for black issues, for black women issues. I'm like, it's meant to be a flex of just like, whoa, don't get it twisted. Like, you need my support because I've done this for the groups, the minorities that you represent in the form of being a woman, being black, being a black woman, But Taissa was like, you're right, I will adjust my tone as I tell you to go fuck yourself. It's like, I'm not about to bend a knee to you. I'm not going to submit to you and tell you what you want to know. It's like, I choose not to talk about that and you want to force my hand. It's like, nah. And you want me to bend the knee. It's like, no, I'm not about that. So that's definitely interesting. Going to be interesting how that's going to affect situations going forward. Because Diane not supporting you means she's probably going to most likely support Phil just to give you the bird. Just to flip you the bird. Just because you talk back to her like that. So probably not going to make things good for, what Taissa has planned, like her campaign and everything. But we'll see how that plays out. But the reason why I was referencing Shauna in that regard of like, oh yeah, someone trying to get the truth out of Taissa about everything. so was Adam. He basically wanted Shauna to tell one true thing about it. Because it's like, oh, because they're on their little dates and stuff like that. So she goes up to a guy because it's trying to make up for all the stuff they missed out on when they were young. And she's basically trying to like buy booze, get an older guy to like buy booze, but the guy's probably younger than her or maybe the same age. Which, speaking of like Shauna, the actress who plays her, Melanie Linsky, I think I found this out last episode because I never knew this, or at least never realized it. She's a New Zealander. I'm like, I've never known that. Because the things I've ever seen her in, she's always done an American accent. So I don't think I've ever heard her just speaking, her Kiwi accent, you know? So I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Because I referenced the actor who plays Ben is Australian, so I think I found out the same time, you know, once again, that X-ray feature on IMDb. I love it so much when you're watching stuff. But other than that, like, I think I've noticed that last episode, but I just forgot to bring it up. But regardless, I thought that was kind of a cute thing where she was like, hey, can I, you know, that's my friend over there, can I get you to buy us beer? And because we forgot our IDs. Don't worry, lady, I'm sure they're not going to card you. She's like, hey, don't be disrespectful. Like, I'm still super young. And he's like, is this a sex thing? And she's like, no. And she's like, well, maybe. I mean, we're still in that phase where we're kind of figuring everything out. He's gonna, okay, chip in an extra $20. And she's like, 10. He's like, mm-mm. And she's like, okay, fine. Here, the cheap shit, by the way. He's like, okay. And she just turns to Adam. She gives him the thumbs up. I love it. It's, you know, your typical, like, oh, we missed out on, like, doing, like, the crazy, stupid stuff as teenagers. So, but Adam and ask, like, oh, why'd you miss out on that? She's like, and she just allocates it to, I got straight A's and I got married young. I guess, like, her straight A stuff, even before everything, before the wilderness, like, before they got lost, she was probably she had, like, even before then, Shauna definitely had some complications because of, like, the whole, like, Jeff thing kind of hint that, I think it's all supposed to hint, like, Shauna's always had a dark side. It's just, you know, it's just, well, to be fair, I think a lot of, like, those who survived because they all had dark sides that just came to the surface, and they found the darker versions of themselves, and they're trying so hard to put them back in cages, you know, as they return to society. I think what she implied about being young and getting married, it was applicable too, but still. But her time with Adam was really interesting. The mini golf thing of like, oh, like aiming over the fence and over the rocks, and she nailed it. And it's like, right, because of that, you have to do what I say without question. And they're jumping off a bridge. And I thought it was interesting because she saw Jackie being like, this is going to get someone hurt. Now, I didn't know whether, now, there's many ways that could be interpreted. That could be interpreted as literally, as in a physical sense, or literally in an emotional sense of, people are going to get hurt because, I mean, it's almost like you're doing the same thing, and of course the person you would be seeing is your best friend, considering you kind of like screwed her over with the whole Jeff thing because you were sleeping with Jeff behind her back, and now you're cheating on Jeff with Adam. Like, you know, there's meant to be a parallel and line drawn there. So nobody can 100% escape the past, all of them, because it's always... Misty seems like the only one that's not haunted. Everyone else is, because Misty enjoyed it. She felt good. She felt powerful. To the point, like, everyone's trying to avoid her. Like, you know, the whole thing with Natalie. And I love that she's literally reading a script of, like, oh, how to support a friend who's lost someone to suicide. And she's saying all this stuff, and it's like, no, Travis didn't kill himself. Obviously, like, he was murdered. But I don't know what it was. But someone's behind this, and I'll figure it out. And Misty's like, hey, like, we can meet back at my place, and we can, like meet up at, like, 1900 hours. And it's like, nah. So she just goes off and does her own thing. And she meets up with Kevin, which we got some insight on that when they were younger. Her dad, like, showed up calling Natalie a slut because Kevin was in her room. Also, Kevin wasn't the kid I thought he was. Like, I thought, like, her tall... Like, she had her two friends at school. I thought the taller, like, gothy one was Kevin, but it's like, no, we hadn't met Kevin yet until this episode. We met a younger Kevin. It's like, oh yeah, like the whole like, oh, it's that thing of like, oh, like Nirvana's going mainstream now. It's like, oh, we can't help it, you know. It's not their fault they got popular, but for Kevin, it's like, yeah, but I liked it when it was just kind of our thing, just the two of us. I was like. Like, obviously it's kind of hinting that he liked her, and I think Natalie did too, but with her dad like her dad being the abusive piece of crap he was, that he was coming in there straight up attacking Kevin, you know. But Natalie kind of hangs out with Kevin, And I thought it was interesting because at first she was just like, oh yeah, Travis committed suicide. I was like, you were saying it was murder, so why are you saying that now? Like, I thought she was going to shift the conversation to be over like, no, I don't think he killed himself. I think but it's like from a different, like, I think the sad thing is Natalie went about a very roundabout way to get Kevin on her side. Basically, she manipulated him by being like, oh, I can't kiss you. I'm thinking about Travis and we were each other's sponsor. And I don't know whether like she doesn't want to make out with Kevin because she is like, it's like how I felt about you was before everything, like my life was complicated and kind of messed up, but it was like things really changed the most after the wilderness, after being lost. And I think it's because her and Travis went through that together. Like, you have that connection with someone. Your relationship, despite how complicated it is, was forged through something traumatic. So, which can both make and break a relationship type of thing. But I wonder, is that why she's like, I'm not the same Natalie that Kevin used to be best friends with and secretly in love with. But her using him like that, I'm like, if you had asked him, I mean, he already pulled strings to get you guys out of jail. Like, you probably could have pulled strings to be like, yeah, I think Travis was murdered. If you had opened it up to him, he probably would have looked into it for you. But she probably has a hard time. Like, she doesn't want to sound crazy because she knows how crazy she'll probably sound. So she even got him her mixtape from her house. Visiting her mom. She's like, there's only one thing I need, and it was Kevin's mixtape, because she wanted to make him feel nostalgic and just kind of get him in an emotionally vulnerable enough place that she could use him and manipulate him. But afterwards, like, she went home and kind of washed her face, and I guess she felt so bad about doing that, because it's like, oh, Kevin's a nice guy, but also it's like now she's closer to finding out what happened to Travis, or just maybe spending time with Kevin made her feel guilty, just because it's like, oh, like, maybe if things were different, me and Travis, so there's no telling what fully was going through her mind at that point in time. But I thought it was fascinating that Misty followed them. In fact, one of the people she's supposed to be looking after, she brought her with her. And it's like, oh, like, she's like, I'm going to get a chocolate martini. And the lady that's with her ordered something. And she looked at Misty. Misty's like, no, I'm not going to judge you. Go ahead, do whatever you want to. But then Misty sees Jessica, the reporter, keeping an eye on Natalie. So she texts Natalie, and I was like, Natalie's going to ignore that. And the moment she calls Natalie, I was like, you're going to see Natalie ignore your call. And she does that. Now, and immediately Misty's almost like, oh my God. It's like, yeah, because no one wants to talk to you. But then, Kevin notices Misty and is like, what are you doing? And she's like, yeah, that reporter, like, she was watching you. And it's like, and what are you doing? She's like, oh yeah, like, how'd you even find out I was here? She's like, oh, it's part of the citizen detective, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, she's keeping an eye on, kept tabs on everyone. And I love this line, because I'm me and I think too much about stuff. I love the line of her Nat being like, we're not Rizzoli and Isles. I butchered that, but we're not Rizzoli and Isles, which I was like, hey, I get the reference. To anyone that's not familiar, just an off chance. Rizzoli and Isles was a kind of crime drama police procedural that was on TNT for a couple seasons. The show is done. I've never, I won't go into it because it's going to get into a depressing route. I never finished the show because a certain thing happened in and out of the show that made it hard for me to kind of keep watching it. It's nothing against the show. It's one of those shows it'd probably be hard for me to ever circle back to in certain regards. But the reason why I think it's fascinating, because Nat saying that, it's funny because Rizzoli, who was played by Angie Harmon, a brunette, and Misty is supposed to, I guess, be the Isles just because of her personality and kind of being the oddball. Isles is kind of the oddball. But she was played by Sasha Alexander, who she was kind of a strawberry blonde at the time she was playing that role. If I remember correctly, it's been a couple years. So, there's deeper levels to that, But I mean, because we are talking a more, investigative team, and it's, two investigative women, I feel like that might be, the new go-to. Because that's the only one I can think of that same ilk in nature of, right, they're both in the solving crimes and mysteries angle. Plus, like I said, their respective personalities kind of match Rizzoli and Isles, but also just, I think their hair colors and everything could also be another parallel to it. But, and I love that the lady with her is like, it's okay, you remind me of my granddaughter. No one likes her either. I was like, Jesus. And then Misty goes over to Jessica and it's like, oh, hi. I don't know what you think you're doing, but I got an eye on you. She's like, oh yeah, hi Misty. And it's like, see, you're under, like, you think you've got me all figured out. You think you're kind of underestimating me, but I'm a lot more dangerous than you think. And Jessica's almost like, yeah, sure, and okay. So I'm assuming, we know now, no, she works for Thaisa, so Thaisa probably filled her in on everything. I doubt, well, Thaisa filled her in on everything, but probably enough of the personalities of the people that she's following. But that's also, like, the thing is, out of all the entire group, Misty is the biggest psycho, so, like, I'd be careful if I were Jessica, because she could get got at any point in time. But, so aside from that, though, at the very end, Shauna gets told by Misty, oh yeah, like, Travis is dead. Like, no one's told you about it. Because I don't know if Thaisa knows yet. Because they know, like, they were looking for Travis, but they didn't find Travis's body until, like, after Nat had her conversation with Thaisa. So Thaisa probably doesn't even know yet either, so. But the thing is, I thought was so fascinating that Misty went out of her way to tell Shauna. But I guess it's like she's trying to figure it out on her own, so she wants to see how people are going to react. Because she was a little too gleeful to, like, drop that, like, bomb on Shauna. And Shauna was kind of rocked to her core. Because I guess knowing that someone else who survived all that is dead. She didn't talk about the murder situation, just the... I think did she say suicide? I think she said, oh, Travis killed himself. But part of me was almost wondering, like, is there something even deeper? Was there something between her and Travis? Like, the reason why she took that so hard? Because so far, we've seen her have, like, Nat's run into... she's had run-ins with Thaisa as well as, Misty now. So she hasn't crossed paths with Shauna, but I think now that Shauna's getting brought into this by Misty, I think it's only a matter... Well, Misty knows she can't go to Natalie for help, probably knows that Thaisa's going to avoid her, but now it's like, she knows she can't be around Shauna because Shauna was like, don't even call me, I told you not to even do that, so... We'll have to figure out, once again, see who the other survivors are and, their perspectives on things. But, because these main four are the ones we keep circling. I'm curious, like, is that going to expand? But also, like, I get why they're not doing that either. Because now like, if they reveal anyone present day, we know that they survived, So it's like, there's that, you got to balance that mystery of bringing people in when you really need to story-wise, present day, but they've also constructed it like, oh, everyone's disappeared, nobody wants to contact, everyone's just trying to move on with their lives, so it fits narratively why we don't know who else survived. It's like, yeah, you're going to slowly find out with the past, those reveals and deaths that lead you to find out, like, oh, who made it and who didn't, who just straight up died and who just got killed and eaten, so it's definitely going to be really, really interesting to ultimately see where all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.